In many decades of reporting, I've seen time and again in the Balkans, Afghanistan, and in the Middle East how desperately difficult, dangerous, and sometimes boring the job of the peacekeeper can be. This report from 1969 shows that for the British troops in Northern Ireland, keeping peace in your own country is an even more complex task, frustrating, unpredictable, and often thankless. The British squaddy learned the hard way that he cannot be friends with everyone, and sometimes not with anybody. What was true for the troops was also true for us journalists. Reporting hostilities in your own backyard, it's impossible to achieve what both sides recognise as impartiality. In Protestant and Catholic quarters of Belfast, I remember being frequently taunted with demands that we tell the truth. But whose truth? As reporters learn as they covered the recent referendum in Scotland, unfairness is often in the eye of the beholder.
Belfast Shankill Road, where 4 weeks ago British subjects were shooting at British troops and the troops were shooting back. Sweeping up the debris has certainly not banished the memory of that battle between infantry and a Protestant mob, in which 3 men died and 60 were injured, including 22 soldiers with gunshot wounds. The bloodshed and the strict security measures that followed inevitably changed the relationship of the soldiers with the people of Belfast.
Before that actually happened, I found that the people on the street had no respect for our guns at all. You know, if you tried to move someone on with a weapon, you just push it straight out your hand. But now they know that if we've got reason, we will fire. They're a bit more wary of the guns now, and we don't get quite so much from people on street corners as a result of that Saturday night. I'm not sure it's a good thing or a bad thing.
It's disgraceful the way they carried on. Couldn't even bear the children talking to them. They must have been brainwashed when they were sent on to the Shankill Road, because no British troops would have got on like that. Well, there was no call, the brutality they used. And they left the butts of the gun on a pub over beside a bar where I live, where they beat the men against the door.
I think if we look upon this rather like Cyprus, there we had communal trouble between 2 peoples who were easily recognizable. You had your Turkish Cypriot and you had your Greek Cypriot. They were quite easily definable. But here in Ulster, the British soldier is dealing with his own countrymen, who all look alike and all speak alike. And it's very confusing for him. And it's very difficult for him to understand the bitterness and the tensions of the situation. It's particularly difficult for him to understand why these 2 factions want to destroy each other. And it's particularly difficult for him to understand why they want to shoot at him. And it's not generally known that over 1,000 rounds of ammunition from weapons of many different sorts were fired at the soldiers on the Shankill Road on the night of the 11th, 12th of October. It's a very large amount of ammunition fired in the streets. Now, in war or in internal security operations overseas, a soldier would accept becoming a casualty from the enemy, and he wouldn't hold any hard feelings in his heart about it. But to be shot down by your own countrymen does lead to a very difficult situation and hard for the soldier to understand, and he doesn't take very kindly to it.
Nor does the British soldier take very kindly to any aspect of his bizarre duties in Belfast. Whether he's imposing a fragile truce along the barbed wire peace line that keeps the Catholic and Protestant communities from each other's throats, whether he's patrolling the streets night and day, or passing chilly hours on sentry duty, he has more than the fear of bullets and petrol bombs to contend with.
You go out on the street, and if you're in a Protestant area, you get their side of it drammed down you. And when you go to a Catholic area, you get their side of it drammed down you. You know, you hear both sides of the story every night, and I quite honestly get sick of listening to it. You know, I just close my ears and say yes, no. 9 times out of 10 they're drunk, the ones who come over and try and impress on you that one side are murdering bees and the other side are the same. You know, they're both the same. Well, I wouldn't have thought it had to be done in the UK, you know. In England, you sort of, there's no trouble like this. And then you come to Ulster, and you have to do it, you sort of think, well, I've done this before in other parts of the world, but not here, it's ridiculous. You know, you try and think what they're doing it for.
The soldiers certainly have plenty of time to ponder on Ulster's follies. Tall buildings make tempting perches for Belfast's amateur snipers, so the soldiers have occupied the rooftops, where they're alone with their thoughts and the pigeons. In a monastery overlooking the peace line, monks possibly meditate on Belfast's holy war, while overhead men of the Royal Hampshire Regiment keep a drafty vigil. When trouble comes, it's often after dark, when pubs discharge their customers filled with Dutch courage, and when those engaged in the traffic of arms are likely to seek the extra cover of darkness. So every night roadblocks go up. Regular searching of cars has yielded little, yet the army feels it must continue, partly to convince the extremists that the lid is still firmly on this turbulent city. But the public is already showing signs of irritation, and it is questionable how long these measures can continue without dangerous friction.
When trouble's all over, I mean, we're not going to be able to sort of walk around any Protestant areas, not freely, because at the moment they do hold some malice against us.
How do they show this malice?
Well, army out, Dad's army. I mean, just recently, the bricks and that, and things, we get more spitting from them now than we used to.
They spit at you?
Yeah, spit at us on the street corner. But you have to take this because it's a part of the job. You know, it does get my back up personally quite a lot, but there's not much you can do about it because they're just there to provoke you, and if you let them see you provoke you, they're spitting us, they've got away with it, you know. It's just...
Police-army cooperation is essential in Belfast. In Catholic areas where the RUC is unwelcome, joint military and police patrols are restoring normality. The police could easily have resented the army presence, but according to most officers, this is not the case.
I, myself, am quite satisfied that we, as police, could not have carried on without the assistance of the military. And in that respect, I say that they were welcomed not only on the streets of Belfast, but also in our police stations. They think that this thing, as my Inspector General says, must be played softly, softly, and we are prepared to play it along as the situation demands. But I do not see the military being capable or allowed to go in the immediate future.
Everybody has said, and it has been said by a great many commentators, that the morale of the Royal Ulster Constabulary has taken a terrible pasting in the past year. Do you think it was further affected by bringing in the military?
Oh, on the contrary, I would say that the arrival of the military has helped to bring us back and regain some of the morale, which was at times rather low in the past.
At least the police morale is bolstered by the comforts of home when duty's done. Not so the soldier. In Belfast, home for 3,000 men is something like this. A camp bed in a hastily converted office, factory or warehouse. Everyone admits that accommodation is depressingly Spartan. But the troops have to be where the trouble is. And that's in the already overcrowded slums, where this is the only sort of shelter large enough to take their numbers. Sanitary and washing facilities are far from adequate, but at least the office buildings are reasonably warm. In a lofty warehouse where crates of detergent have made way for a company of infantry, they'd yet to overcome the heating problem. Of the 8,000 troops now in Ulster, 5,500 are reinforcements on a 4-month tour of duty. This rapid turnaround of units is putting a heavy strain on the Army's manpower resources. But everyone agrees that 4 months is quite long enough in conditions like this. These men of the 3rd Light Infantry bore the brunt of the recent shooting in the Shankill. Nowadays, there are hot meals when they can get to them. But in their isolated outposts, they frequently cook for themselves. It's the only answer. With a duty roster that demands 3 hours on and 3 hours off, or 3 on and 6 off night and day, there can be no set time for eating or for sleeping. When sleep is uncertain and often disturbed, the laconic message on the wall has a special significance.
As far as I'm concerned, the most important thing is to crash out and get a good night's conk before you go back on again. Otherwise you'll be on your chin strap. Well, it's not always that bad though, you know. It eases out in weekdays mainly. We're not quite so pushed, and we do get about 6 to 8 hours sleep.
What do you think of the living conditions you're in now?
Well, you can see for yourself, it's a bit pathetic, isn't it? Well, I think it is anyway.
Oh, it's better than we have had though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, well, you know, it's a lot better than the floor, which we were sleeping on when we first got out here. But even then, you know, you'd have thought they could have found something a bit more comfortable.
Have you ever done any job like this before? Any internal security jobs like this before?
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah.
Where was that?
In Mauritius.
How does this job compare with the job in Mauritius?
Well, it's just about the same, like, you know. It's sort of the same thing, like, I was over religious and all that.
Yeah.
And, it was a bit, well, I reckon it's a bit more rougher out in Mauritius, like, you know, than it was here. But it's just about the same.
Were you in Mauritius?
Oh, yes, sir. Well, it was about the same, like, you know.
What do you see?
Not so many bullets.
No. They did have the same sort of arms.
No, they didn't sing God Save the Queen when I was shooting at you there, did they? Oh, black.
Different colour too.
Does it make any difference that you're doing this job amongst people who speak English and in a town which is a British town?
Oh yeah, I mean, we're in Mauritius, you know, you'd have to care sort of thing, but we've been a different race. It never entered your mind so much as it does here. We bring British Isles, you know, your own sort of people, your own backyard. That's about the biggest you know, it shook me when I first came out here to think what happening in our own country, you know. Where if you go abroad, I mean, it doesn't take you so much.
How long do you think that you can go on doing this job, I mean, without getting really fed up with it?
Oh, we're fed up now.
Well, we'd like to go home, well, I'd like to go home now. I'm fed up with it.
Do you think that if you moved out now that the situation would be all right, or?
No, I think it just go about the same again. It's still, you can still feel it in the air now, though. Even though it seems quiet, it's not really.
It's carrying for you, is it? I don't think any people such as yourselves would understand, you know, what's happening in this place if we lived here for 100 years. I know I wouldn't, because it's drilled into, you know, from being brought up from a child. Even the children over there, they know more about it than we do. You know, they'll come up to us and tell us what they want us to do and where they want us to go and why all this is happening, you know. And they know more than what we do.
When you came in the army, did you think that this was the kind of job you'd have to do?
No, if I knew, I wouldn't have joined. No, I joined to see the world, not to get shot at. I'm not saying I'm a coward, like.
To Second Lieutenant Nick Gaskell, commanding an infantry platoon in Belfast brings a special set of challenges.
I think the worst problem in this situation at present is boredom. Obviously, the soldiers have been, you know, in the same place, doing the same stags for a long time, and they get slightly fed up with it. And trying to keep them from being bored when you're actually come inside here and when they're resting is very, very difficult. And secondly, our problem, I think, is we get a lot of problems from home, which you can't obviously deal with, being over here. Marital problems about hirings and flats. And we've had a lot of these, and a lot of them you've got to try and deal with them over the phone and over, you know, with letters, rather than being able to go and see the people themselves.
Yeah. Considering that you have these two things to deal with, how do you think the morale of the platoon has been?
I think the morale is extremely high. There was obviously a period, a fortnight ago, where it went downhill slightly because there was nothing happening. The more that is happening, the blokes enjoy it more. You know, they like to get out and they like to see it. They like to be where the trouble is. But when there is nothing happening, they obviously go downhill a bit. And this is the problem, trying to keep their morale up.
There's little that can compensate husbands for the separation from wives and children. But the Army Broadcasting Service does provide taped messages and record requests from families at home.
Hello, Dennis. How are you? I hope you're taking care of yourself. I wish you were home. We're all missing you here. Happy birthday on 26 when it comes. Don wants to say something, so does Don.
Well, I don't know. You going to be first?
Hello, Daddy. I'm pleased to meet you at
I love you because my heart is lighter.
Inevitably, the state of mind of the soldier in Ulster depends greatly on his relations with the local people. Army policy encourages off-duty fraternization, but forbids it on duty, without much success. Even if they wanted to, it's unlikely that the soldiers could discourage the young ladies of Belfast, who've apparently succumbed to the fascination of the uniform. However much it's frowned on by officers, a little flirtation must have supported morale more than anything they could have done. And the same goes for other unofficial contacts. When the troops first arrived, they were often overwhelmed with tea and sympathy. Cynics warned that it wouldn't last. But it has. Soldiers have suspected at times that Catholic and Protestant ladies were competing for their support with flasks of tea and coffee and soup and packets of cigarettes. But the picture can change quickly. In areas where troops recently fought Protestants, the flow of refreshments is only just recovering from a sharp decline.
Hello. There you are, love. That's for after your lunch or after your dinner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm very pleased that they are here, really. Because if they hadn't been here, I wouldn't have been here for the run away somewhere out of the road for us. That was a terrible time we had those 2 nights. Terrible.
And you feel safer now this time?
Certainly, I do feel quite happy about it. Quite happy about it. I was up with the soldiers the first one Sunday morning. They were here, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Well, you went to see them?
I went up and gave them their tea, their breakfast.
Did you? Some people say that the soldiers haven't been very polite, that they've been rude to people.
No, I never found that, really. I did not.
Would you be, how would you feel if the soldiers went away? Would you think it's time they could go away yet?
Oh no, I wouldn't dream of going away. Not for a long time yet. You're never sure here now.
The children of Belfast have also accepted the soldiers on their streets without reservation.
Basically, kids on both sides are for the soldiers, because it's sort of something new. I mean, to see a soldier standing at the street, I mean, not everyone in the world's got a soldier standing on his street. I mean, they feel quite chuffed with it, because they're a bit too young to understand why we're there. But they seem pleased enough we're there. Give them something to say hello to in the morning. I don't think they're scared of, you know, they're not shy of us because they come up and talk to us, play around with our webbing. In fact, sometimes they're a nuisance, and they're pulling us to bits.
At an official level, relations between the army and the public is now a top priority. Community relations projects are second only to security. Every commanding officer wants his unit to be more good neighbourly than the next. Men of 41 Commando Royal Marines are entertained by a Catholic Young Men's Association. The concert is a thank you gesture for improvements that the Marines made to a Catholic church hall. In East Belfast, where militant Protestant songs evidence the militant Protestant community, men of the 2nd Battalion, the Queen's Regiment, are building an adventure playground. Some soldiers resent adding this kind of work to their already heavy duties, but their company commander thinks it's worthwhile.
Well, when we first came into this area, there was, of course, a great deal of trouble between the Protestants and Catholics. And since the Catholics were in the minority,
we automatically deployed to surround this minority. And the feeling has been, on the Protestant side, that the army had become partial towards the Catholics. And this has caused quite a lot of bitterness, resulting, of course, in the troubles that we've had in the recent past. We decided that the army is, of course, impartial, but it must show its impartiality. And I felt that the best way of doing this was to take on one or two projects like this to show people the goodwill.
Was this a playground before you started work on it?
Well, it was, but during the trouble times, of course, a lot of the kit that had been here was taken down and used for the barricades.
Yeah.
So when we came to see it, it was really a derelict area.
This playground is, I presume, used now only by Protestant children?
Yes, this is deep in the Protestant area, and of course around in this particular area the reaction to the army was distinctly unfavourable before we came.
Yeah.
But I'm delighted to say that things have changed dramatically now.
3 times a week, youngsters from the Shankill area invade a church hall to take boxing lessons from the men of the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Regiment.
You went to the ring, did you? Yeah. Well, like this. Did you? Yeah. See, these ones here. Were you as good as that? Were you? Oh, I expect you might have been as good as that.
The officer in charge of boxing is Captain Geoffrey Banks.
I think generally they're great youngsters, I honestly do. They're no different from any other children the world over. They've probably got an inbuilt aggressive attitude, the will to fight, something which you don't find in all youngsters. It's dominant here, definitely.
But do you think that surely there's enough aggressiveness around here without you encouraging it?
We don't want to encourage it, we want to channel it. We want to take the youngsters off the streets, put them into the buildings, and say, if you've got any surplus energy, if you want to take the air out of your lungs, this is the place to do it, and we'll encourage you to do it, here, and not in the streets.
Give it. That's the boy. That's it. That's it. And again. That's the one. And again. Keep them on. Keep it on. Keep it on. That's it. Come on. Come on. Try again. Left, right. Left, right again. Keep it on. That's the one.
The fighting in Belfast, as you know, and in Londonderry, has been amongst the poorer people and in the slum areas. Now, such people do need help, and there's much, I think, that the army could do to help them. We can do things for the children and the youth in particular, I'm sure, here, so that they can have a different attitude for the future, perhaps to live in harmony with each other. This is what we'd like to see. We can also do quite a lot for the grown-ups, I think, so that they can appreciate that this is their army and we are prepared to help them and to understand their problems.
Another of the Army's problems is security along the 120-mile border that Ulster has with the Republic of Ireland.
Hello, Tango 34 Alpha, this is Tango 3 Alpha. Set up a roadblock now at grid 972-415, over.
No one seriously believes that Ulster is in danger of an invasion from across the border, but there is always the chance of a revival of the IRA's sabotage campaign that kept troops and police busy up here from 1956 to 62. And the border must be policed by someone, today by the men of the 17th 21st Lancers, patrolling in their Ferret Scout cars the scores of unapproved roads to and from the border. Many of these border duties were performed in the past by the B Specials, but in line with the recommendations of the Hunt Report, the Army has taken over. Not only is the Army, with its scout cars and helicopters, better equipped for border duties, it has replaced the politically controversial specials in an area which is politically sensitive. If the legislation to replace the B Specials goes through, the proposed Ulster Defence Regiment will be purely a reserve force, and border duties will remain with the regular Army. These duties at present centre around the search for arms and keeping an eye on both the IRA and the Protestant militants of the UVF, both difficult if not impossible tasks. Though they think an arms race has been going on, the endless searches and roadblocks have yielded little evidence of it. Anyone wanting to import weapons would hardly drive them across in broad daylight. 120 miles of border and an even longer coastline offer more discreet avenues of approach. If the weapons are coming in, this is their destination, Belfast, where the soldiers have laid aside their rifles to fight on the Ulstermen's terms, with words.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like now to introduce you to the CO of the Paratroop Regiment, and also some of his members, his fellow officers of his mess. I'd like you now to give them a hearty welcome into Shankill.
For Colonel Grey, a welcome from the ladies of the Shankill Defence Association, militantly Protestant and bitterly critical of British troops.
Ladies, I'm scared stiff tonight. I was delighted to be asked by you to come along and talk to you, really for two reasons. Firstly, to meet some of you and have a look and see what you look like. Because normally when I'm going round the parish of Shankill in my evening rounds, I see you either scrubbing your doorsteps or in curlers, and tonight I can see most of you have been round the pear shops in the Shankill. And it's great to see you looking so glamorous. That's not flattery either. It's difficult for soldiers in this sort of situation, as you can appreciate, and that's why we welcome your help. The soldiers are trained not in this sort of way. They're not trained to walk around the streets and be policemen. And therefore, it's when you see them going round the road in a sort of tactical formation, when you ask them to have a cup of tea, only one of them comes across to you. The other two stay on the side of the road. And when they ask you to turn your porch light off, in some occasions, as they have done when they're having a cup of tea, this is because I insist on them maintaining the battle disciplines which they are taught in normal everyday training, because this is the security we have to maintain. The reason for this, although you may say no one is going to shoot at you on the Shankill, which again many of you do, is because in discussion about the night of the shooting on the Shankill, many of you say to me, well, it wasn't anyone from this area. I can't be too sure. I don't want to have to write to ladies like yourself at home and say this is why your son has been killed or your husband, and I can't therefore take that risk. If someone is going to shoot at them, well, I want them to be prepared to get out of the way, and that is why we move around in a sort of tactical way around your streets. I'm really very pleased to be here to answer any questions you have. If you'd like to shoot them at me, please don't tear me apart.
I will put the question in an indirect way to you, sir. Would you order one of your men, not order one, but if one of your men told her to bring in our Union Jack, would he be then reprimanded by you in doing such a thing? Perhaps you could answer it that way.
I'll answer it another way. The straight answer is yes, he would be reprimanded. But I'll tell you what happened. One of the soldiers the other day, in the area of Morpeth Street, of my headquarters, was being hounded by a lot of the children, and he had been all day. He'd been on sentry outside that building, and he was being called by the kids, and had been, again, I know this, for a long time, a Fenian bee. And he, as you know well enough, because I've watched you clip them round the air during the day, he stepped out of line and batted him round the air. He shouldn't have done that. The little boy went in and told his dad that this had happened, and immediately his dad came whistling down the road with a hammer. And that soldier was in England the next morning.
Well, sir, one of our questions has been prompted in my ear by one of the ladies that...
Yes, I did. Yes, I gave you a straight answer. I would not order any soldier. What the question he asked me was, would I reprimand a soldier if he did that? The answer is yes, I would. I go further. All my soldiers have strict orders not to even touch any Union Jacks.
Save our gracious Queen, long live our noble Queen, God save our Queen.
It could easily happen again. Protestant loyalists singing the national anthem one moment could be battling with British troops the next. The publication of the Hunt Report was the last flashpoint. In the months ahead, the Stormont's reform programme could provide others. The troops cannot leave the streets at present, and even when they do, they may yet have to return, as they have time and again for 100 years.
God bless her.
It does seem that perhaps the two communities in Belfast are relying on the troops now to act as a buffer between them. Don't you think there's a danger that when the troops are pulled out, that the gap between the two factions might be even wider?
Yes, I think this is a major problem. I'm well aware of it myself. Nobody likes having their protection removed, especially when it's provided free. It's very nice to live under protection and feel everything is all right. I think the timing of relaxing our security measures will be important. Obviously, the peace line is a critical part of the Belfast problem, and I think we've got to be careful how we relax on that. But we may have to take a chance, I think, about thinning out the soldiers and moving to a different type of peacekeeping operation, more perhaps by patrols and presence at critical periods like weekends or flashpoint dates, rather than being permanently on the streets.